in terms of the regulatory bodies who do the testing of these new products, since these are emerging technologies, and I'm not sure, maybe people in the agency probably maybe will have department to actually know what to test, and be able to confirm the report they have from the manufacturers. Who really is responsible for testing?
The testing is done by the manufacturer.
The manufacturer.
And the results of the tests are communicated to the agency.
And so they just accepted that way the result is good, and we make decisions based on that.
I do believe there's some scrutiny. I do believe that they look at the methodology, just the way that you might assess a research paper for its quality. They ask for the methods of testing, and one of the big things that we were pushing for many years ago was when you are reporting the results of your tests, you should be reporting the material characteristics, because if there's one thing that I want you to take away from it, is that the material properties of the nanomaterials are essential to understand their structure, function, relationships. I didn't say that very well. Let me say it very clearly. It's very important to understand the physical and chemical nature of the material so that you understand which aspect of it is responsible for causing the impact that you're studying. It's very important. We cannot say anything about carbon nanotubes. We can only say the multi-wall carbon nanotubes with this aspect ratio and this rigidity did this. Okay, very important to be that specific about it. And that's the kind of information that needs to be transmitted and wasn't necessarily being asked. The agencies didn't know that they should ask that. So I think that's an important evolution, is now with these testing comes a more sophisticated understanding on the part of the regulator about which kinds of information need to be transmitted with those applications. But they don't do any of their own testing. Consumer Product Safety Commission does a little bit of its own testing, but they don't have the capacity to do that.
It's similar, like in other standards, like they came to know about things when they happen. So this is why they were saying that we will be dealing case by case so that they can develop a general guideline which they want the manufacturer to follow.
It doesn't make any sense to come up with a blanket ruling before you have information, and they really can't. So in the early days, they had to do this case-by-case assessment. They had to wait for the scientific community to provide them with information that helps them make those regulatory decisions. So while some people have been frustrated at the pace with which the regulatory agencies have acted, there are solid scientific reasons why they've been taking their time doing it.
Yeah, now they have, like I say, evolution. Like it will be developed over time. It's not going to be there in like a day or
Now, I will say the good news is that unlike many previous emerging technologies, nanotechnology set a new bar that I think each new emerging technology is going to have to meet and clear. And that is the conversation about risk started really early, and attention was paid, maybe not fast enough for some people, but just the fact that the questions were being asked in 2001 when the initiative was launched, and that federal action in terms of their own internal structure and how they were funding things, they were happening in parallel, and that was novel. And I think that's a model for whatever's next. Synthetic biology, geoengineering, you name it. I don't know if you've covered any of these topics in this class, but those are the next nanos, among others. And so maybe they're going to be held to a new standard now because of the work that has been done in nanotechnology.
In terms of the OSHA, I know that there are some preventive measures like maybe face masks. Are there any drugs like maybe somebody can use before, if there's any leak or any pool?
No, not that I'm aware of. It's very difficult even to be able to tell if someone's been exposed. So what really needs to happen first is that you need to have biological markers for exposure to nanomaterial. So like for example, if you've been exposed to lead, you can measure the lead in your blood, right? If you've been exposed to certain other things, it'll show up in your hair. Or you'll have a chest x-ray that looks different than your baseline x-ray. So there are biological measures that occupational health specialists can use to determine whether there's been an exposure. We don't even have that for nano at this point. So counteracting those with a drug is just, I mean, that's like, I don't know, really radical. Really far in the future, I think, too. So there's a lot of really baseline stuff that needs to be done before we can get to that point. But the good news, more good news, I want to end on some positive notes, particularly in the occupational space, even though there's such a very limited amount of research. Some of the research that NIOSH has done, which is really unassailable, but good stuff, is that the personal protective equipment that we have available to us today works. So you might think small part, let's say you have a respirator or mask. You might think, oh, a little particle can really get through that mask much easier than a bigger particle. It's actually not intuitive, but it's not true. 300 nanometer particles can get through a mask easier than a 5 nanometer particle. And that's because the 5 nanometer particle is going to be subject to Brownian motion, and it's going to end up bumping into a fiber in its pathway. It's not going to be able to zip right through. So there's some more physics in there, but it's very interesting that the big particles just like bump against the wall. The very small particles have this Brownian motion, and they end up getting electrostatically drawn into the wall, and it's the medium-sized particles that end up zipping through. So face filtering masks work. Gloves work to protect against penetration of nanoparticles to your skin. We have the tools we need to protect people if they know enough to use them and if they're using them properly. Guess we're done. Thanks.